Thank you so much, Coach. Welcome, everybody. I know it's a Saturday evening, so I'm going to try and keep my session as interesting as possible. And of course, I will leave. I mean, after I'm done, I will take in a lot of questions because I'm sure you have questions to ask me. So let me begin. And like Coach mentioned, I would like you to put in your questions in the chat box. So once I'm done with my basic information to you, I will go forward with each question and answer them. So yes, let me share my screen and begin with the presentation. If somebody could just let me know if my screen is viewable.
Yeah, we can see the screen.
Perfect, great. Okay, so today I'm going to be talking about how you can plan and fuel your ultra marathon. I know there are, like Coach explained to me how there are going to be 15K runners, 30K runners as well. The idea over here is to guide you through what you need to do in the next 1 month before your race. How you pre-plan, because there is nothing that if you do the previous day it's going to work the next day, and you need to plan it out. So I've tried to cover as much on those lines. Let me begin. So what's important to understand, and this is very, very important, especially for the ultra marathoners, is when you're running, these are the systems in the body that function, right? Your heart rate's up, your respiratory rate is up, your cardiac output is up, and your BP is also increasing because your heart is trying to pump as much blood all over, right? However, it's important to understand that your digestion and, of course, your excretion is at an all-time low. So this is very, very important for you to know, because this forms the basics of what you do right before your race, during your race, particularly. Okay. Why is this the case? Because a lot of times the mistake happens is not the fact that you can't run that distance, but in probably the fact that you haven't fueled right, or you've done something wrong that's going to end up making you either puke or get nauseous or black out during the race. So this is the basic that you need to know when you're running. So why is it important to plan on what you're fueling? Like, at the end of it, you're going for your run, you have stations in between, you know what you have to eat, or you have options to choose from. Well, it's not that simple. It's also about what you can take in. So you need to plan what you're fueling depending on the distance you're planning to cover, the duration that you have clocked in or plan to clock in, the type of terrain, of course, the weather and the temperature, the altitude, what is available in terms of both food and fuel, and of course, your individual sweat rate. So all of this makes what you're fueling absolutely customized to your requirements. While there are generic things that would work, if you are somebody who's looking to clock in your best, you have to make it absolutely specific to you. Okay. On that note, I will begin with what are the nutrition recommendations. So we'll begin, of course, with pre-race, right? Now, pre-race, I am right now covering over here what you do on the day of your race. So what's your focus here? Your focus here is primarily to have enough stamina and also to have enough endurance, to have energy to your muscles so you don't end up having stiff muscle cramp in between your race, and definitely to prevent hunger, especially for those doing 30K and above. You're likely to get hungry. So what do you do? The focus has to be on carbs, right? Carbs are essential because they are the ones that are going to be the source of energy that your body is going to reach out to. So carbs are going to be converted into glucose in the body, which is going to eventually give you energy. So which means including meals with rice, wheat, poha, ragi, jowar, based on what's comfortable for you, oats and fruits is good. If you see, I've given you a range which is from something as heavy as rice and wheat to something as light as fruit. The reason being, it has to be something that you can stomach. Okay, it can't be something that makes you want to go to the loo the moment you start the race. Okay. A high fat meal actually does also help, especially for those doing 60K plus. But this meal has to be something you take in 2 to 3 hours before. Otherwise, it will 100% cause a gastric distress, which I'll discuss a little more in detail. So this could be peanut butters, avocados, nut butters, any of these included as a part of your meal works pretty well, provided you've had it 2 to 3 hours before your race. What you need to avoid is to do something extremely high fat and something with too much fiber in that 30 to no, in even say 1.5 hours before your race. You don't want to do the extra fat 1.5 hours before. You don't want to do something with very high fiber thinking it's going to sustain and give you energy later in the race. It wouldn't, because what it would end up doing is, because it wouldn't be digested by the time you start your race, you'd end up having a lot of gut discomfort. Okay. The idea of fueling has to be simple. You just don't want your muscles to starve, because if they do, you definitely get tired, but you could also lead into an injury. Okay. All that I've explained to you right now are things that you can do 90 minutes to 45 minutes before a race, not at about a 30-minute or a 20-minute junction, because then again, it would lead to gastric distress. Before I move on to what you do during, I would just like to add one note on pre-race, of course, also includes what you do the day before or 3 days before. At that point, even it's very important that you don't do something new for the first time. It's definitely advised that you do have a small, maybe 2 weeks before your race or 3 weeks before your race, depending on how the coaches guide you through it, you do a small setup of how it's going to be when you're racing, and then plan and prepare for how you are, what you plan to eat and how you feel when you're racing. Why is this important? Again, because a lot of times it's not that you can't, but it's just that your body gives up because you haven't fueled right. Okay. So anything that you do 2 to 3 days before has to be something you've done in the past, your body's used to it, and hence you're doing it. Why is that important? Everybody talks about carb loading. In fact, the recent science also speaks about low carb but high fat diet. So why is it I can just go about and do things because everything around is abundant in carbs and fat? That's not the case, because you want to remember that anything that's high in carb and fat will also add to body weight. Okay, extra carb adds to body water, extra fat obviously adds to body weight. So you need to be comfortable at that body weight to do that distance running, because if you don't practice or you haven't done it in the past, it will definitely affect you when you're racing, and of course lead you into an eventual disappointment, frustration that, oh, I did clock this much in during training, but I couldn't do it during race. So important not to try something new until unless you know it's working for you. Moving on to during race. The most common concerns that I get and we've seen with during racing is, during your race rather, is gastrointestinal issues, like I explained. Nausea, vomiting, heartburn, wanting to take a dump, of course, vomiting is very, very common. And these are the most commonly seen issues during race. And of course, there is nutrient and fluid loss, which sometimes leads into somebody fainting or somebody having any other kind of reaction based on, of course, their medical history as well. So how do you address these is what I'm going to be talking about, what you do during race. During race, your focus has to be hydration. That's your basic focus during race, because you want to compensate for the water losses. You want to replenish the muscle glucose. So of course, you've eaten a meal beforehand, but you are, sorry, somebody wants to say something?
No, please go ahead. Nobody.
Okay, all right. So you have, of course, eaten something before, but you also want to keep fueling in between, especially for those doing the longer distance. Fuel to the brain, very, very important. And this is why carbs are essential, and carbs or simple carbs are good when you have during race, because glucose is your fuel to the brain, and having something with glucose in it actually lets you focus, push yourself at that point. Else we develop what we call as central fatigue, which can then stop you from going ahead and running as well. Prevent cramping, also essential in ultramarathoners, because you could have a lot of sweat loss and electrolyte loss, which could eventually lead to cramping and slowing you down. When you're looking at hydration, I'm going to be speaking about sports drinks a little later, but isotonic solutions. What are isotonic solutions? Are basically, the solution should be such that it doesn't make your body shift focus from your muscles to digestion. Like you remember in the first slide that I told you, digestion is at an all-time low when you're doing a run, because other body systems require more attention. So any beverage that you have has to be something that enters the body, goes in directly to the cells, does its job, and that's why it has to do, of course, get out later. But that needs to be the focus of any solution you do. Why I'm speaking of this is because a lot of times people come in and say, I just take a scoop of glucose and put it in my mouth. That will give you an instant feel good factor. It will push you in for about maybe 3 kilometers down, but you will again hit a low after that. And that's because what's happening is you're causing an insulin spike and a drop. So the spike is when you feel good high, because the sugar is still in the blood. But when it drops is when you again will hit a low. So it's important that your solution is isotonic, meaning it has to be a 6 to 8% solution. However, for marathoners and ultra marathoners, we say you can even keep it to a 4 to 6% solution, because you need constant supply. If you're not somebody who's if you're doing a shorter distance, or you're not somebody who's taking in a sports drink, coconut water is fantastic. Slightly salted, slightly sweet lemon water is okay. Simple carbohydrates during your race is essential because you require quick energy. The more natural source are fruits and dried fruits, which you can grab. Again, these need to be something that you do during your runs and practice, because only then you would know which ones you digest. I'll give you an example. I had a client once who was, of course, a full marathon, not an ultra marathon, but a full marathon runner, and hadn't quite practiced eating something like dates or figs during the practice runs, because he felt he could cover it anyway. But when he had to do it in the actual marathon, he felt so uncomfortable, because of course these dried fruits also have fiber, which can also end up making you want to take a dump. And if you have an early morning race and you haven't taken a dump, then it leads to discomfort during the race, right? So always practice what you're going to do. Focus over here, like I spoke about pre-race, is to replace your muscle glucose and prevent any tiredness and energy. Okay. Avoid any heavy food. When I say heavy food, I'm talking about food which is rich in too much fat, because your body is not going to be able to take it. And any food that requires digestion, like I told you before. Keep hydrating. And over here, I want to mention that sip on water, don't gulp water down. You want to sip on water at about, even if you do a 200 ml over half an hour, 45 minutes is still okay. Because when you gulp water down, you will want to go take a leak. But when you keep sipping on water, then it's not the case, because your body actually gets hydrated better. So sip and not gulp water when you do get that break in between. Focusing furthermore a lot more on fluids over here. So what I want to tell you is dehydration is real, okay, and it really affects your performance. In terms of, I'm just giving you a very scientific data over here. Why I'm saying this and why have I brought so much science into this is because it's super important to know that you can actually collapse if you're super dehydrated. Okay. I think most marathoners, ultra marathoners especially, do this, where you check your body weight loss before a race and after a race to actually understand how much fluid loss you've had, or basically how much water body weight you've lost. And that's how much you need to rehydrate during your race to make sure that you don't end up going into dehydration. Okay, so this is just an example, or not an example, this is just a research that tells you that for the percentage of body weight lost as sweat, what is your consequence? Okay, at just a 4% loss, you probably don't move, you start getting stiff and stuff. At 5% loss, especially in summer, you could have added heat exhaustion. At 7% loss, you can actually start to hallucinate. And that's especially something that ultra marathoners need to focus on, because especially when you're doing it in terrains and, altitudes, this hallucination can be dangerous. Okay. And at a 10%, you can actually have heat strokes and also have a circulatory collapse. So that's how important hydration is. I know all of you hydrate, but what I want to tell you over here is that it's not something you're doing just to keep pushing, but it's also something you're doing from preventing from collapsing. Okay. So that's just letting you know it's important, because I do know a lot of people don't like to hydrate too much, because they feel they probably waste time, because they probably want to take a quick leak break and things like that. But that's also not a good option. So yes, that's why hydration is very important. Do you need a sports drink? I'm asked this a lot of times, so I thought I'll cover it over here already. So what you need to know is, for a little over about 7.5 to 8 kilometers of running, your performance will begin to drop if your body has sweat a lot. So your requirement for sports drink is purely dependent on your sweat loss. And even if you're somebody who doesn't sweat out too much, at about maybe about 10 to 12 kilometer run after that, your body will start to actually lose its salts. Okay. So that's where you need to take a call on what kind of sports drink am I doing. Your sports drink, like I mentioned, needs to be something between a 4 to 6% solution. With regular use of doing even a 250 ml or 500 ml during your practice runs, you will actually figure out what feels good for you. And then you can take a call. Some people even do an 8% solution. Some even do a 4% solution. Okay. What's important is whatever is your solution has to be something that also replenishes your electrolytes. More potassium than sodium. So it has to be a quick, good balance of this potassium to sodium to make sure that A, you're not cramping, B, you're not having high sodium levels, which can further affect, remember your blood pressure goes up. So it will further cause issues there. Up to 2 liters of sports drink in a day is okay. So just because a sports drink, which is good, makes you feel good, you don't want to overdo it as well. Okay. Moving forward to what you do post race. This is something that most people forget. You do it very well during training, but you absolutely forget when you're doing your actual marathon. Why is this important? And today I'm just covering over here your post race immediately in 30 minutes, but post-race nutrition goes in for 2 days after an ultra marathon, because that's how much time you require to replenish the body stores to prevent any kind of muscle breakdown and get back into training or routine immediately. So post-race, you need to make sure there's no, you're fueling for muscle repair, you're fueling for muscle recovery. So a quick simple carbohydrate and protein snack is great for recovery. When I say simple carbohydrate, I'm actually talking about sugar, right? I'm actually talking about things that are really quick to absorb by the body immediately after race. Okay. So it could be fruits, dried fruits, potatoes, sweet potatoes, along with egg, milk, or any plant-based milk, right? Antioxidants essential. Now antioxidants come in as simple as in your fruits or any dried fruits or any of your berries, as you would like to and as you're used to, because they help in recovery. What you need to avoid is a very high calorie, high fat food. And what I mean by this is a lot of times post race, you want to go in and kind of belt like a masala dosa. That's a great option, provided they aren't like making the oil too much on it, right? Because then what happens is your digestion starts slowing down. Remember, your body is at a high heart rate and it has to slowly come down. So when you suddenly shift focus into the stomach because you have to digest masala dosa, you will actually want to puke out. Okay. And second is a coffee after race is a terrible option because coffee will dehydrate you. After you've hydrated with enough fluids, then you can have a coffee a little later. Okay. So that, and why am I talking about masala dosa and coffee is also because this is something you shouldn't be doing even when you're training. After a long Sunday run, to go to one of your tiffins and eat a masala dosa and coffee is in the wisest option. Okay.
Suhasini, sorry to interrupt. There's a question. Slide showed 5:1 sodium, but I think you mentioned more potassium than sodium. Can you please clarify?
Okay, then that might be an error. My mistake. I will go back to that once again. Okay, no, it's potassium to sodium ratio. So it is a good balance of both that you need to have. Sorry. Going forward. Yes. And whatever I spoke to you right now, we're talking about post-recovery nutrition to go in about 30 minutes after the race, because that's the time in which your body is at the zone where it's requesting for food, it's asking for food. Now if you don't give the food at that time, what would happen is it would go in for more further muscle breakdown, because your muscle, the glycogen stored in the muscle, basically starts getting converted and restoring whatever is lost. So it's very important that in order to prevent muscle loss and to prevent any muscle injury, you want to do what you're doing within 30 minutes. So that's important, and I wanted to specify that. Going forward, I'm just putting out a few recovery foods that you can look at and including. I've just tried to make it pictorial so it's generic. So that's your protein, that's your vitamin C, that's your zinc, some omega-3, some magnesium, and of course, some fruits like pomegranate and pineapple, which will help in reducing the inflammation that's generally there in the body, right? Yes, so that's your post-race meal. Okay, and this is what you do in the 48 hours after. So I'm not talking about including fish and chicken and everything in that 30 minutes. In the 30 minutes after, like I gave you examples of fruits, dried fruits, potatoes, sweet potato, and all of that. But this I'm talking about the next 2 days, what you fill your plates with, how you plan the next 2 days of nutrition. Okay. So yes, going forward, event time nutrition. I've spoken to you in detail, but I'm just going to put it up in quick snippets. So pre-event, you load your carbs 2 days before. You don't do it just 24 hours before. A rough rule for those ultra marathoners who do a lot more specific things. I'm just putting the input down for you guys on how much gram per kg body weight and few examples of what you could do. During event, like I said about, depends on how much you're covering and what you have. So that's your calorie per hour. Don't try to do anything new on a race day, and please take care of your guts during the race day. Hydration, important to keep sipping on water. That's the takeaway over here. And of course, to also prevent drop in too much salt. So sodium intake is important, but not too much is also important for you to take care of. So it is still a 5:1 ratio, but you need to make sure that your solutions are in the right electrolyte ratio. Reason being is a lot of times people use electrol, okay? But remember that an electrol is made for diarrhea. It's not made for sports. So you want to make sure that even if you're using it, you're using muscle recovery. So this is in terms of right after your event. So your muscle recovery is something that you focus on with high protein, high carb, good fat foods to reduce inflammation and all of that. So this is just a quick snippet of what you need to take care of for your events. One thing, this is in terms of a lot of questions and dilemma that most runners do have. Carbohydrate intake. So I've tried to cover that. So carb intake is important because there is also a lot of ketogenic diet that people do follow. However, a lot of research is not done on the effect of ketogenic diet, which is also fat. And, so there is some amount of logic to the fact that, okay, high fat will help me last longer with more energy. However, because you're running, you're also losing a lot of electrolytes and everything. A ketogenic diet hasn't been well, there's not enough success to say that it works well for ultra marathoners or even marathoners because of the side effect that high ketone levels in the blood can have. Transportable carbs. So this is what this is where we are talking about the carbs to have during your run. So which is your hydration drinks, your gels, and all of that. Glycogen manipulation. So a low carb, high fat diet about a week before to during your training is actually good. But this is something, again, you need to practice. Your stomach should be able to stomach in that extra high fat. Generally, too much fat can cause diarrhea and, loose bowels. So that's why this entire manipulation of your carbs to fat is something you practice in advance during training. And then you do it as it works best for you. Even for those who actually we work on and give like a low carb, high fat combination during training, we still take care of a morning carb rich meal and then the fats that come in, like I said, 2-3 hours before. So that's how it works. Hypohydration versus hyperhydration. Over here, I just want to mention that when you start your race, you need to be hydrated. You should, if you're practicing hyperhydration, which a lot of people do, it has to be something that you're used to and something that you've trained your body to hold on to that much water over time. And again, something you need to have practiced. Hypohydration is bad, especially at the start of your race itself. If you're dehydrated, it will definitely affect your race. So these are a few questions or few things that are generally discussed around a runner's diet. So I just thought I will cover the broad headings of it. So few things to keep in mind from whatever I've told you so far is do not try anything new on your race day or 2-3 days before your race. It can have a very bad impact on the system. And what to eat and drink during the ultra marathon need to be something that has to be practiced. And this is something I'm just saying primarily for the first timers. And your weight loss in kilos. So this is in terms of, if for those who are planning to figure out how much carbs works for me, and you're planning to do this just over the next 1 month. So the weight that you lose during your run in kilos is how much carbs you require per hour. This is something we actually strategize and we try to work around, where you can do anywhere between about a 5 to 8 grams per carbs per kg body weight during your run. Again, it's something on how much your body is able to take in and how much it's able to stomach. But this is for those who are planning to actually start working with carbs. And take your recovery drink within 30 minutes after you finish your race. Please don't ignore that, because it can cause muscle damage. Foods that help during your run. You can have a quick bite of chocolate. It does have a very good psychological effect, which will get you going. But you want to make sure these are not the super sweet ones. Moderately sweet ones are okay. Or don't go for the super dark chocolate unless you've already practiced and you're used to it, because it can have a bitter feeling, making you feel more thirsty. So chocolate use also has to be something that you try, because otherwise chocolate can get you to actually get more thirsty. Dates are great, fantastic options. You don't even have to eat them all at a whole. You can just keep nibbling on them and also having them. Berries are also great options that you can include, because they have that little wateriness in them, which also helps. Chia seeds is great for hydration. You can just add it to the bottle of the water that you have and keep sipping on it. And lastly, pumpkin seeds, if you want something a little salty, which you can probably feel like, especially in April and it's hot, then some salted roasted pumpkin seeds are great, because they will not be too much. And at the same time, pumpkin seeds are a good source of zinc and magnesium, so they could actually prevent you from cramping as well. Superfoods that I would call for a runner, and this is not about what you have during your run, but this I'm talking about during training and during your run. Tender coconut water, fantastic. Between, after, before works really well. Again, sipping on it and not gulping it down, please, because otherwise you definitely want to take a leak right before your race. Milk and eggs, these are options what I'm talking about immediately after, especially during training. Pumpkin seeds, like I said, works really well during, but if you can't stomach it during, after, before, it works really, really well. Watermelon, fantastic electrolyte, hydration, replenishment, and the redness in it comes from an antioxidant called lycopene, and that's fantastic for muscle recovery. And just one note I want to tell you, eat the watermelon with the white part a little bit when you're eating it at home and during training for recovery, because the white part has something known as citrulline, which actually causes vasodilation, which allows more blood to go through your blood vessels, which will cause a better recovery. So I'm talking about this as a recovery food, and since summer's approaching. And the most favorite, and I think most of you probably do it, at least the seasoned runners, is a glass of beetroot juice a day. Beetroots have nitrates in them, which help in the same vasodilation. But beetroot is not about recovery. Beetroot is about endurance, which you start having about 2 hours before your run or your practice runs, or even the day before your practice runs, if you're doing an early morning run, because of its nitrate in it, which helps in improving the oxygen carrying capacity, which means you're able to push a little longer before you tire out. So that's pretty much it. Just keeping it short and simple and keeping it open to questions at this point. Yep, I'll stop my screen share and rather wait. Let me take the questions in. Okay.
There are a couple of questions.
Yes.
The first one is from Praveen.
Yes.
Does 4 to 6% glucose solution cause insulin response, or will it be quickly absorbed by the body to cause any insulin response? That's the first part. The second part I will ask after this.
Sure. Should I take the first one and then
go ahead? Go ahead.
Yeah. So a 6 to 8% solution is an isotonic solution. So which means that when you have it, your system doesn't have to go into a digestion mode, and something lesser than about a 6% is slightly hypotonic, which means that until and unless you're not somebody who wants that much carbs but just requires a little feel of it, then a 4 to 6% works pretty well, especially for marathoners. So it purely depends on how you're going to take it. Will it cause an insulin response? No, not really. It will not cause a spike and a drop. So that's the whole idea of it.
Great. Post race, if a person feels fatigue, shivering, confusion, anxiety, is this due to dehydration? How to address this? I know this is a reactive approach, but in this case, if it happens, how to address it?
Well, it is a lot of dehydration. It is, especially if there's confusion, it is definitely dehydration because it's as close as hallucination that you can get to. Fatigue can come in also because of a pre-meal if it's not taken well. A lot of times people don't want to eat something because they feel that, especially, see, most of your races start early morning. And say sometimes if you've not been able to take a dump in the morning, people feel if I put something into my system, then I'd want to take a dump and then that's going to slow me down or affect my race. So that way, if people don't eat something 2 hours before, 3 hours before, then it can lead to fatigue. So fatigue can be purely carb based, but shivering, confusion can be electrolyte and dehydration, and anxiety of course can come in if the electrolytes are not in, or if more of electrolytes that way than even carbs. So it's a combination of carb to electrolyte to hydration being poor. I wouldn't say it would be zero, but I just think in this case it would be less. Yeah. And again, gulping plain water down can also dehydrate you after a point, okay? Because you're losing salts, but you're not replenishing the salts. So which means you just keep hydrating, thinking plain water is good, but plain water can actually dehydrate you after a while because then your body is just having plain water without the electrolytes, and that can make you feel like you want to also puke sometimes.
Yeah, but that's a little dangerous situation, like a hyponatremia.
Absolutely. Yeah. Hyponatremia is something that can come in because of that. And which is why actually how much you need to hydrate is something you understand during practice. Too much water in the body can make you feel full. Too little water can cause other issues. So the sweat rate and how much weight you lose during a practice run is the best way to figure out how much you need to hydrate yourself. I mentioned a high fat meal 2 to 3 hours before. So I'm just reading that. One second. And it said, did you say before the race? Yes, before the race. This I'm talking about those covering longer distances. A high fat meal is fantastic 2 to 3 hours before. Like peanut butter, nut butters, any of your almond butters, having an avocado based toast with some eggs over it. They work really well, but 2 to 3 hours before, because it has to be digested and available for energy, does work pretty well.
Yeah, so there's a question from Naveen during the 90K run, what should be the interval of taking water, electrolyte, as well as taking some carb like peanut butter, sandwich, banana, gel, etc.?
Actually, this question is the direct relation to the carbs per body weight that I spoke about. So on that note, you should, if you're doing an ultra marathon or 90K, you want to make sure that every hour there's at least a rough 30 to 50 grams of carbs that you're taking in. Okay, this is a very rough approximate, keeping in mind an average body weight of 60 to 70 kilos. Okay, so the 30 to 50 gram carbs can come in from, say, a banana at about a 15-minute junction with maybe a white bread at about a 45-minute junction together. They can give you that. So it depends, or it can just be some pure dried fruits that you can have. And at the same time, a 6% solution, even if I do a 30 grams and 250 ml water, is a 6% solution, which is 30 grams of carbs in it. So it depends on what you're able to stomach based on the gastric load that your stomach is able to take. So some people can't stomach anything. So then it's only the hydration drink with the carbs in it that will work. Some people, especially with ultra marathon, you have to train your body to be able to stomach something, at least at the end of like an hour and a half, or a midway point. So at that point, a peanut butter toast is great. Even a peanut butter chicky works actually. And what else could you do? And a dried fruit laddu could also work pretty well.
Yeah, so I would like to add something to that, right? So when we talk about an ultra marathon run, especially in mountains, so there are going to be so the planning need to start by looking at the elevation profile to begin with, and also marking on the x-axis, put the distances and also the time that you're anticipating to reach. So Naveen, that's a direct answer to you as a coach. And then the second thing is also map the temperature variations, because you know exactly, let's say 4 hours down the line, you're going to be at the 30th kilometer, 35th kilometer. So you know the time of the day, you know the temperature at Ooty, and also what elevation you're going to be in. And then fundamental knowledge that you need to carry before this planning is to know what is your carb requirement per hour, right? So because as Suhasini already mentioned, it be 30 grams to 60 grams depending upon your capacity, depending upon what pace and speed that you're going to be running at. And then make sure that your hydration, it's easy to drink an extra load of water and run, kind of when you're walking rather than when you're running. So you know that in uphill section is going to be a lot of walking involved, so you can probably use that to rehydrate, and then downhill section is something that you can use to kind of uh, take care of this energy and also the rehydration that you've done. So your planning needs to start with the elevation profile, the time, the distance, and the weather. And then your basic carbohydrate requirement, energy requirement, and also don't forget one important thing is the raised day nutrition available on the aid stations. So I'm going to just tell you what's going to be available on the aid stations. Okay, so we will have dates, watermelons, biscuits, some candies, and of course the coke and potatoes, and some of the hard little solid foods are available for the 60k and 30k runners also can experience, can enjoy some potatoes at the last 4 or 5 kilometers. But again, salt, chicky, oranges. So anyway, electrolytes, something that's going to be available. It's going to be well stocked aid station, and then especially the first timers really enjoy picnicking at different sections of Ooty.
Nice. I did like to add one thing over here. Whatever you're eating, right, during those stations is also something you want to chew on well and nibble
Yes.
on. Don't gulp it down because then it will lead to a gastric distress. So nibble on it. Like even if it's a piece of orange, suck in the juice and then keep nibbling on it. Even if it's a potato is great, but nibble on it. Don't gulp it down, because once you just chomp and then gulp it down, then honestly you're leaving all of the digestion for your stomach to do, and your stomach's busy trying to kind of take care of your muscle recovery at that little junction you're giving it. So try to use your chewing and nibbling to do whatever you're eating in between.
Yeah, so there's one question from Pradeep. What's your view on caffeine during the race? I hear that it improves alertness, reaction time, and block pain receptors. Yeah.
Actually, caffeine's great provided you're able to stomach it. Okay. Again, something you want to practice. Caffeine's great as a quick shot about 15 minutes before your race, provided you've been hydrating till from about one.
Yeah, please carry on. There's some noise.
Yeah. So basically, I said that caffeine's great. It actually gives you that little kick. But the only thing with caffeine is rather two things is it is dehydrating. Okay. So if you're only planning to do a nice big mug of coffee then and not hydrate well enough 2 hours before, you actually are going to collapse half an hour into your race. Okay. So you need to have hydrated, sipped on water about an hour into getting into your race, and then 15 minutes before do like a cup of coffee, a black coffee, not the milk coffee. Okay, black coffee, and take it down. Why black coffee? Why not milk coffee? Because milk will cause stomach issues and then you'd want to take a dump. So not that. So black coffee. Second is caffeine. Coffee, for those of you who actually wake up to a cup of coffee to take a dump, coffee actually is a laxative. Okay, so you want to make sure that coffee used before any race is something you've practiced, done it, and then go in and have it. It does work. In fact, that's the reason why Red Bull works for you. A lot of people do take Red Bull in between races, but again, you can't do a whole can of it. You can do about 2-3 sips of it because it has a little bit of caffeine in it. It does work. In fact, Gatorade does have GU gels with caffeine in it, at the right ratio. So caffeine is good, it helps, but you just need to have been used to it. It can't be a first timer doing coffee.
Yeah, and generally, when you're going for a high concentrated caffeinated drink like Red Bull or even Coke for that matter, it's advisable to flatten it first, right? So you can probably mix it like 1:3 ratio, 1:4 ratio with water, and then consume that. And then that also removes the fizz from the Coke, and then you get the sugar and the caffeine going.
Yeah, you're not having to deal with any gastric issues in the stomach. Yeah.
Right, so one more question. Race is at 5 a.m. I don't know which race this is. Ootyultra starts at 6, by the way. Then of course you need to reach the venue at 5 a.m. That's 5:15 or 5:30. The high fat meal would be at 2 a.m. Is that okay?
No, I wouldn't advise it that way. I would rather ask you to take in a little fats the previous day dinner, because that's anyways going to be stored in your system, and then go in. And in the morning, you can do a more carb-based beverage. Like you could probably do like a simpler thing. If you're somebody who's waking up early to do is would be an oat porridge. No, so the rice and the wheat and all that are things that I'm talking about the previous night. An oat porridge or even just a banana is good enough, depending on how much you're able to stomach.
Yeah, and Chandran rightly said that I personally find banana as good energy booster during the race. Are there any alternatives or second option? Because we always do not get bananas at all hydration points. So Ootyultra certainly will make sure bananas are available.
Great. I'm glad you figured banana works for you. Dates are a quick early alternative.
Yes.
Dates are something you can even just put in one of your zippers and then just munch on. Try to get the the less dry ones. Okay, the khajur ones are super dry. They will only get you more thirsty. You want to get the little more honestly in India the lion dates is that way. Your Kimaya dates is that way. So the ones that are a little more chewy, they are better for you.
Yeah, and I always enjoyed having a sandwich, a bread sandwich, with some peanut butter jelly kind of combinations. That really works.
Works really well. Yeah, it does. In fact, even one other thing is for those of you who can't do a bread, because a lot of you can't tolerate bread and it can
Gluten
cause
allergy.
bloating. Apple with peanut butter over it is also a great option.
Okay, awesome. So there a few other things that I would like to mention. So from my own experience as a marathoner, ultra runner, so there are a lot of these ideas that I'm sure some of them would be listening to these ideas or concepts for the first time. Don't straight away go and jumpstart. Okay, Suhasini said that, Coach K said that, or somebody else said that. Because nutrition is a complex topic. As your distances increase, the nutrition becomes more and more complex. For a 15K, there's no demeaning runners' capabilities. 15K runners would possibly finish the race at a mean time or median time of about 2 hours. So 2 hours running is still manageable. But those who are running the 30K, you're basically spending about 3 to 4 hours or even 5 to 6 hours of running. Of course, 6 hours if you walk in, that's DNF. So 5 hours, 30 minutes is the cutoff time. So that's a lot of time spent walking, running, and then of course you're also enjoying, you're under stress constantly. So the hydration needs to be absolutely managed and practiced very well. So you need to start practicing. If you have not done this, you have to start practice. If you're going to be in Uchi on your feet for about 4 hours, then make sure that you've done at least once before you reach Uti. And then whatever hydration, nutrition, the distance between the 8 stations are going to be about 3 to 4 kilometers. But if 3 kilometers, 4 kilometers on a flat course, even if you're running at 8 minutes per kilometer, around 25 minutes you will reach. But in a hilly terrain with the elevation of 200, 300 meters, the 3, 4 kilometers might take about 45 minutes to 50 minutes, or sometimes even an hour for you to walk, especially if it's going to come in the second half of the race. So you need to basically accommodate for those differences also. But some of them ask this question, do I need to carry a hydration flask with me? That's up to you, right? Because I like to keep sipping water, like Suhasini already mentioned. It needs to be like, remember drip irrigation. So you need to keep sipping water. So that works fine rather than going to the aid station and gulping under 200, 300 ml. And then you're slouching, the water is kind of moving in your belly and you're not able to run. And there is a lot of stress in the system. So the hydration needs to be mastered. But don't try to figure out all the aspect of hydration within the next, let's say 28 days. It takes a lot of time and effort to practice. Now, maybe a question to Suhasini. So you have coached or you worked with Ryan to coach athletes like Virat Kohli and Robin Uthappa. and also a few squash players, the national record swimmers. And can you just tell us the comparison between, nutrition, hydration, how simple it is for them versus how complex it is for ultra runners? Because I'm going to say that ultra marathon nutrition is much more complex.
It's absolutely complex. In fact, I think a lot of people take to ultra marathon also to challenge themselves, right? Like they always do that to do that. So ultra marathon is a different ball game altogether. Moving on from cricket now, so for somebody like Kohli or say Uthappa and stuff like that, it depends on everybody's nutrition very honestly depends on their body
Yeah,
framing.
Suhasini, I think
Okay,
you're
it's on
breaking.
hours of training you do in a day. And am I not audible?
Yeah,
Hello.
I don't know if it's just my side problem or, yeah, please continue. It looks okay now.
Okay, let me restart. So, am I audible now, Coach?
Yeah, yes.
Okay. So I was just saying that each sports requirements depends on each person's body weight, based on their body fat to muscle ratio, the hours of training. Okay, and also what kind of competition situation they're going to be in. Right now, if it's something like T20, it's as good as doing a short race. Right, you have to be quick in your hydration, in your electrolyte, in your micronutrients, in your amino acid replenishment, because it's very demanding. Actually, it is demanding. Now when you move into an ODI, you still have a little more space and time, so you kind of plan your nutrition around that way. And a test match, of course, is purely dependent on when you get to play. Right, now moving on to something like squash. Squash and swimming are sports where swimming especially, you're not out in the open, so you don't get free oxygen that's there. You have to come out for each of your breath. So when I'm working with swimmers, we're working a lot on vasodilation, on more oxygen in the blood, on their breathing. Not mute. I mean, of course, we take care of nutrition. When I say breathing, I'm talking about how each breath can be, the oxygen the body is able to take is a lot more. And when it comes to squash players, you want to remember that they're in a closed environment like badminton players are. So technically, after the initial part of their game, they're actually breathing in others' carbon dioxide and less of oxygen. So again, it's different. Now, when you come to ultra marathon, you have abundance of oxygen, but what you have as a challenge is the long duration that you need to sustain, or the long distance. And especially in ultra marathon, the temperature and the elevation are big deals. And say if your body weight is a concern, being you're extremely lean, or say you're in the overweight category, can also come against you in your run. So it is absolutely individualistic. And so an ultra marathon is very challenging because you go through different phases of change that you need to do. And also with regards to one question that came in, as a first time 30K runner, the only thing I'd like you to do is to understand what foods you're able to stomach well over the next 28 days before your race, because then they become your comfort. So the next 28 days is not about how much I can eat or what's my variety, or what am I having for lunch today. It's more about, okay, does this make me feel good? Does this make me feel bloated? Does this make me feel light? And that's going to be your focus. And of course, to start remembering to sip on water than gulp water down. That I see a lot at different stations. People are gulping water, and that's going to actually come
Yeah,
against.
that's the very common, let's
Yes.
say, advice given. So you need to be hydrated all the time, right? So then, like, what is the limit, right? So then you end up overhydrating and causing more troubles. Yeah,
Hyponatremia.
definitely. All
Yes.
right. So there's one question about salt tablets and also reload recovery products. Are they really beneficial?
Salt tablets, again, depends on your medical history. If you do have other medical conditions, then I wouldn't quite advise it until unless we start to use it at a quarter tablet, half tablet, one tablet during training to see how you feel with it. Second is Fasten Up Reload, Fasten Up Recovery. Fasten Up was actually a brand that was made for running, and then they started diversifying with a lot of the things. So their products are pretty good. Most of their products are in tablet form, obviously, because because that's the quickest and easiest way you can take them along. But they also have a little sense of fizz in it, which means whatever you have, you need to have used it during training to be okay with that little sense of fizz coming over it, and then drinking it and going. But they work pretty well. Especially the reload is something that I think most marathoners take in. I think the other brand is even Uniway. There's a brand works a lot on running and marathons. So
Yeah,
those
so
brands.
we're gonna have Leap Storm at on the
Oh,
hydration
super great.
status. Yeah.
Okay. So I think you are going to have the quick replenishment available. So it does work. But don't please try any of these on the day of your
Yeah,
race.
so that's why, see, we've already sent out a note to runners to even buy them online. It's available. So there's a Leap has offered a discount for the Ootyultra runners. You can order them, so you can start practicing. At least you get the taste of it, right? So you can
Absolutely,
understand
very
the taste.
important.
Because on the race days, so you don't want to try something new and overly excited or even not happy about it, right? So that's really important.
On that note, I just want to say that, on 2 days before your race day, thanks to Google, everybody just wants to know what can you do 2 days before your race, or, what can you do 24 hours before your race. So Google will give you enough and more, in fact, pages and pages of data. But remember, you can't do all of that for the first time.
Correct.
You have to have a pre-run of a similar situation. Of course, you can't go to Ooty and run as a pre-run, but at least similar situation, similar distance, duration, to understand what you can stomach it.
Yeah, and one advice to somebody said, okay, I'm 30K for the first timer, what should I do? The if you're training, if you have not done anything in the training, the race day will not be any different. Okay, so because if you're planning for a 30K in OT, you're going to be running for 5 hours, then you should have run at least 5 hours to simulate once, right? So it need not have to be 5 hours if your training is scientifically designed. The longest duration run that could be about 3.5 hours. You don't need to really run 5.5 hours to run for a 5.5 hours running event during the training period, right? So if your training is scientifically designed, you don't need to do that. Absolutely important thing. This is an advice that I would like to give as a runner, fellow runner, and also knowing Ooty so much and the mountain and the course. It's a pretty tough course. It's going to be challenging. Please come there with one goal or two goals. Let's say one is you're going to complete it. Okay, come with an idea that okay, I'm going to complete the race. I'm also going to have a lot of fun. Okay, and take a lot of pictures. There's going to be bisons chasing you at certain time. You need to be ready for that. So you need to have absolutely. These are the two very very important goals. Don't come with an idea that okay, I've run a half marathon in 1 hour 45 minutes. I'm going to crack Ooty in let's say about 4 hours or 3 hours or even 2 hours 45 minutes. The fastest runner to complete Ootyultra is about 2 hours 45 minutes. Okay, so that's like 30 kilometers. Okay, so come with an idea of okay, I'm going to have a lot of fun in Ooty. All right, and even if you pay a lot of money, you will not see some sections of Ooty, but which Ootyultra will take you. Okay, so that'll be my little advice for the first timers. All right, so we are at the top of the hour. It's 7 o'clock, and then Suhasini, this session has been really fabulous, and you've really simplified the nutrition from the point of view of runners and especially what somebody should consume pre-race and then during and after. And we also talked about a few complications, starting from dehydration to nausea to dealing with hyponatremia kind of conditions. Marathon nutrition is not a simple topic, and it takes multiple years for somebody to master. Even some of the most trained, well trained ultra runners will go wrong on the race day. Okay, so they make mistakes because things are very dynamic. You don't really understand what happened. You need to have that openness to come and experience something very unique on the race day. Okay, but what you've done is a fabulous job, Suhasini. You've simplified the idea for all the runners. I'm also closely watching, and then we still have all the 25 people who joined us in the beginning. So that shows the level of engagement. I'm really happy that we were able to do this session. So one probably an opportunity for one last opportunity for anybody to ask questions. You can unmute and then ask questions. That's the last opportunity before we wind up today. And then I have one more announcement to make. So please don't leave. The meeting is not over. Anybody wants to ask a question, so now it's the moment. So please unmute and ask questions. It can be any question, any language, Tamil, English, Kannada, Malayalam, any language. So please don't feel bad that you've asked some question which is generally considered to be a stupid question. So there's nothing other. The answers can be stupid. So please ask. You have your 5 seconds to fame opportunity to ask a question. Okay, all right. So if there are no questions, one last thing that I would like to say, check your comment section. I'm posting a link. So the link will take you to the Ootyultra website. There is a Ootyultra Qua Nutrition. There is a free consultation session offered by Qua Nutrition for Ootyultra runners. It's a 15-minute session. But let's say you have certain ideas picked today, but you want to think about it and then do some research and then come back and ask some questions to the Qua Nutrition folks. You can actually go and fill this form. The link is already shared. And one more very, very important thing is the next few days, we're going to be sending a few important medical advisory. I want all of you to pay close attention and then respond. Okay. Thank you very much, Suhasini. And I'm also grateful to Ryan, Devika, Mradul, and your team for doing a fabulous job of engaging with the runners. And then this presentation is definitely fabulous. I would like to see more and more coming from Quam as we get closer to the race day. A little more finer details that can be going as a tip to the runners. Okay. Sure. Thank you very much. Thanks everyone for joining us.
Everybody, have a good weekend. Thank you, Coach.
Recording stopped.
Thank you.
All right. See you. Bye bye.